Alexa's here.
Not for long. This is all Joshua.
What's up?
We flew to Europe.
In Europe. We flew to Europe.
We flew to Europe for $0, and you can too.
Wow. Wow. Thank you, Alexa.
All right.
And now Alexa's leaving. Today, I'm opening up our travel tool chest and we're talking about the tips and tricks that we've used to find cheap flights and save lots of money. I was counting today, we've used these at about 10 different trips that we've gone on, so we're definitely not pros by any means, but we have learned a thing or two, and in this video, we're gonna be sharing that with you. Before we get in today, take a minute and hit that subscribe button. We have multiple videos coming up from our most recent trip in Europe, but today, we're talking about how we got to Europe for free. That'll be at the end, but we're talking about lots of tips, tricks, strategies that can save you hundreds, even thousands of dollars. So maybe you can even take that next trip for free. This video, we're dividing into 3 categories. So first, we're talking about habits. What are the things you can be doing now? Second, we're talking about dreaming, planning, imagining how you can think about your next trip. And lastly, we're talking about adjusting and evolving because, like anything, your plans probably will change. So how do you respond to that? First, let's talk about habits. Okay, I know this one will be quick. We want to get to other things, but if traveling is a priority for you, save some money. Make it a financial priority. Put it in a budget. If you save $100 a month, that's $1,200 you can use to go on a trip. That and $1,200, I mean, that can get 2 people to Europe. Secondly, we want to talk about credit. Credit cards, especially rewards credit cards. Okay, now I want to give a disclaimer here. Before we get into this, we do not recommend spending money you don't have. We recommend having a budget and following your budget. But if you know that you're going to spend X amount of money on these things, we think you can better optimize that to get rewards, get points, get certain bonus perks that you can then use to redeem toward travel and other things. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. Also remember, credit takes time. Building your credit. Having a good credit score matters. So when you're looking up some of these credit cards that we're going to be talking about and they have all these perks and all these rewards, keep in mind you might not qualify for that. We're young, but we've been building our credit for a long time. So be sure you're looking at all the fine print and not getting in over your head. One more disclaimer, we only spend money that we have. And we pay off our credit cards every single week. We're not waiting until the statement post and we're only using them within a budget. So please do not think that we are advocating for getting a credit card to get this massive credit limit and spend money that you don't have. No, we are talking about using a credit card principally within a budget intentionally to get the rewards points. That's what we're talking about today. So when you think about credit cards, we're not just looking at any credit cards. We're looking at those with rewards, with points that are going to give us something in return for spending all this money. So what are the practical things that we're thinking about? First off, I'm thinking about annual fee. I don't like paying an annual fee, so I'm only gonna look at those that are at $0. I'm also looking at foreign transaction fees. We like to travel, and it's good to know that your credit card you can use in another country without having to pay a certain percentage or a certain charge every time that you use it. So that's something nice to know that you can easily travel with a credit card. So that's another thing. You want to see 0 or no foreign transaction fees. Also, we're looking at APR, but for us, we're not really worried about that because we have a policy here in our house where we pay off our cards every single week and we only spend money that we have. So for us, we're not worried about the APR because we are never going to be in a position where we're paying interest. At least that's not our plan. We've been doing this for years and haven't come into that issue yet. Another thing to keep in mind, if you check out NerdWallet and the Points Guys, those are 2 really good websites. We'll put the link in the description. Check those out and look at their rewards categories. Each month, they share some of their favorites and things that they recommend. And also look at the different cards' sign-on bonuses. Many cards will have, if you spend X amount within 3 months, 6 months, 4 months, whatever the terms are, you get an additional bonus on top of the rewards that you're already getting, like the 1.5% cash back or 2 times the points, whatever your main agreement is. Also, when you're looking at a rewards cards, look at categories. if you know that you spend a lot at restaurants or you spend a lot on gas or at groceries or drugstores or whatever the category is, look at cards that have special perks for those purchases. We have a Discover It card, and every quarter they have certain categories where you can get up to 5% cash back to a certain limit. So we know each quarter we're going to be checking that app to see what is the 5% category this quarter. Is it drugstores and CVS pharmacy or gas stations and restaurants? Whatever it is, we know that we can put all that spending on that one card in that one category and then get 5%. And we're also looking at other cards doing the same thing. So if you can really strategize here and look at each card in each category, you can say, hey, I spend a lot at restaurants and I spend a lot at gas stations, so let me maximize the spending in these two categories. If you know that you're going to be making this big purchase and you have the money set aside for it, maybe in advance apply for that new credit card, get that credit card, and then you can use that big purchase to go toward your bonus, your whatever that initial rewards offer is. So like for example, I sold a lot of camera equipment and I need to buy a new camera. So I timed that with applying for a new credit card, and so we were able to get like $850 with all the offers and everything. I bought everything strategically through the credit card system. We got like $850 now that we can use towards something else. You might be thinking, really? Like, does this really work? Okay, I have a couple examples. So first off, Chase Freedom Unlimited. So we're going to be talking about if you get this card and you spend strategically for 1 year, not even strategically, just basically. Okay, so I have some things written down. So you get 4.5% your first year at dining and drugstores. Okay, so say you spend $300 eating out a month and $100 at a drugstore. So we'll see, and this is any kind of dining, like we're talking delivery, eating out, takeout, any kind of restaurant, fast food, any kind of dining. So $300 a month, $100 at a drugstore. So in a month, you're going to get 18 bucks. That's not that much. I know, but hang on. So then say you have $500 a month in other expenses. Anything. I don't know, maybe you give to support a church or an organization. Count that. You get gas. Count that. Anything. You go to the store. Count that. Okay, so $500 a month there. So of that spending we put on this card, that would give us $15 a month. So now you're thinking, okay, this isn't that much, but this is, okay, so we're only at $33 a month in rewards. But in a matter of a year, we would have accumulated about 400 bucks. It'd be $396. Then if we add the special bonus that Chase Freedom Unlimited has, that Chase has for this one card for the first year, you would get another little bit, which would bring the total to a whopping $409.50. So if you were to get this card and spend for 1 year these amounts in these categories, you would have $410 in rewards, which you could then use to buy 2 round-trip tickets to New York. We're on the East Coast, so that's what we could do. Or we could go from the East Coast to the West Coast all the way to California. We're talking 1.5 probably round-trip tickets there. If you use it over the course of 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 years, over a matter of time, if you're very consistent and strategic with it, you can make a lot of money back just from spending your everyday money that you're already going to be spending. Another cool card, the Discover It card, which I talked about a second ago. This is a card we have, or a card that we have. And at the end of your first year, they will match all of your cash back. So say, I think at the end of my first year, I had $150 cash back. I was in college at the time that I started it, so I didn't have much spending, but I had $150 cash back for my first year, and so they doubled it. So just for me spending the normal expenses that were probably just gas and food when I was in college, because I lived on campus, I got $300 at the end of that first year that I was able to put towards something. And with these first two examples, these are both cards that have no annual fee. We're talking very entry-level, simple cards where if you're just spending a little money, they can really help you out with rewards. But say you're spending more money than we are and you're willing to pay an annual fee, you could look at even the Chase Sapphire Preferred card, which if you spend $3,000, which is a lot of money, but in 4 months, you have 4 months, if you spend $3,000 in 4 months, you can get 80,000 bonus points. If you redeem that through Chase's rewards, ultimate rewards system, that can be $1,000 to go toward travel. I'll link the Points Guys and Nerd Wallets May and summer recommendations below. This first step, this is not a get rich quick. This isn't going to change the game overnight. But if you do this over the long haul, you can make a little bit of money with your spending that you're already going to be doing that can then go towards something else. Also, please don't go open 5 credit cards. That will terribly affect your credit score. So be wise with this. Go do your research. But this is a simple tip that over time can save you money. If my voice sounds a little stuffy today, it's because I am. But this is day 2. I was trying to finish this yesterday, but it got late. So I put back on the same shirt, and here we are. The second category I want to talk about is when you're dreaming and planning your trip. Okay, the big question people ask is, how far in advance should I book my tickets? It's a good question. There's a lot of different theories on this. Nobody exactly knows, but there's a couple takeaways I want to highlight. For one, the cheaper fare buckets, that's what they're divided into. The airlines have different fare classes and buckets that they sell, and the cheaper ones are going to sell earlier on. So what that means is the longer you wait, the more likely you are going to have to pay more. That doesn't mean that you won't find a bargain at the last minute. It just means you're going to be more likely to pay more. So keep that in mind. So the earlier, the better in many cases. And also, there have been some surveys that have come out on this that have said that when you're flying domestic, so if you're in the US, looking at a flight in the US, probably around 60 days, there's a lot of consensus that seems to be the sweet spot. So we're talking like 2 months in advance. And if you're looking to go internationally, 120 days or more. So 4 months or more really is ideal for finding those really cheap deals. Before we get into exactly how we plan and how we look for flights, I want to highlight a few principles. So I'm just going to fly through these. So please listen up, write these down. I'm going to put them on the screen. These are really essential. And you don't have to follow all these, but if you are willing to make some of these concessions or do some of these things, you are going to be more likely to save money. Okay, so what are those things? Number 1, if you have flexible dates. If you're in a job where your vacation is flexible and you can take it at any time, you are going to be more likely to find really cheap flights for random days. Okay, so keep that in mind. Also, flexible locations. I would encourage you, if you know you want to travel, you want to take a vacation, maybe get in here and look at your flights first and then narrow in on exactly where you want to go. Because I think you'll be surprised once you get in here. You're like, oh, I have always wanted to go to wherever, the UK or wherever the location is. And you can see how you can get maybe even not exactly there, but to locations around there for cheaper. Be open to multiple layovers. I know that's not exactly glamorous. I have friends that are like, hey, I want to get on the plane and I want to get off and be in my destination. I get that. And if you have the money to do that, great. But if you're like me, you can save money by just adding an extra stop, an extra layover. And, you can even make the most of these and structuring them where they're longer so you can even get out and actually explore a city. Or you can just hang out in the airport. Another one, be open to traveling during the week as opposed to on the weekends. A lot of studies and research has shown that if you're willing to fly like Tuesday through Thursday, that those flights usually sell for cheaper than like if I'm trying to leave on a Friday and get back on a Monday or Friday to Sunday. Those weekends are usually more expensive. Also, when we're thinking about travel, there are peak travel times. So if you're wanting to go somewhere over the summer or on a holiday, it's going to cost more, usually. So if you're flexible, think about traveling in the fall, in the spring, in the winter. Think about those times when maybe everyone else isn't dying to travel somewhere and you can save a lot of money that way. Another good principle to keep in mind, budget airlines are going to save you money. Now, these aren't always the most glamorous. You might not have the perfect seat, might not include a checked bag. You might not get to check in early. There are other things that, you might not get, but you can save a lot of money and you can get these flights a lot of times for really cheap. So if you're in the US, I'm talking Frontier, Spirit, Southwest kind of on the line there. If you're in Europe, Ryanair, EasyJet, you can get these flights for dirt cheap. Now, the experience might not be Delta, Premier, Preferred. You're not going to have the Sky Lounge and all the other bougie stuff. But you're going to get from point A to point B, and you're going to save a lot of money. So be open to budget airlines. If you're trying to get to Europe, focus on getting across the ocean. That's the most expensive fare, the most expensive leg of your trip is going to be getting from the US to Europe. Okay, but once you're there, there are buses, there are trains, there are budget airlines, there are other things that I'm forgetting. There are tons of ways you can get around in Europe for not a lot of money. So, say you know you want to go to Europe in the spring. I would zoom out and look at multiple locations that you could fly into. Then you could say, okay, we're going to fly into Stockholm because it's a little bit sweeter. It's Sweden, Stockholm. It's a little bit cheaper, but then from there, we're going to take a budget airline and fly to Paris or to Rome or wherever else. So focus on getting across the ocean first and then look at other flights. And whereas you might pay $1,000 to fly in and out of Rome, you can pay $500 to fly into Stockholm, then add a $100 leg, budget airline, to get down to Rome. We're talking $600. Yes, it's more time, it's not as convenient, but it's cheaper, significantly. Sometimes multi-city tickets can be cheaper. If you don't know what that is, it's just not a round trip ticket. It's like, say you're going from point A to point B and then point C to point D. Okay, that might be confusing. So we did it on our last trip where we flew from the US into Venice, and then we traveled around in Europe, and then we flew home from Brussels in Belgium back to the US. So there wasn't but it was still all booked in one itinerary in one unit. So they had one confirmation number, but it was the different legs were all connected. So if you know you want to travel to more than one city on your trip, I would highly encourage you to look at that. Because that way you're not focused on having to get back to wherever, say you fly into Rome and you're like, okay, I'm going to do stuff here. We're going to travel around here, travel around here. You're not focused on having to get back to Rome. You could take a little route around Europe, and then once you get to that final destination, you could fly home from there. And sometimes that can be just as cheap as your actual round trip ticket from Rome. Hidden city ticketing can sometimes save you a lot of money. And a lot of people don't really know what this is about. Okay, so this is where sometimes you can find a flight that connects through the city that you want to go to that is cheaper than actually flying directly there. Okay, you might be a little confused. I studied abroad in Germany, and I needed to fly in to Frankfurt, city in Germany. I looked at a flight from Atlanta to Frankfurt. It was going to be $800 round trip for me just to go from Atlanta to Frankfurt. But if I flew from Atlanta to Frankfurt and then Frankfurt to Basel, which is another city in Switzerland, a smaller airport, it was going to be $200 cheaper. And Basel, the city in Switzerland, was actually closer to where I needed to go than Frankfurt was. So I was on that same leg from Atlanta to Frankfurt as I would have been, and then I got that extra little regional flight that actually made the whole trip cheaper. It's confusing. You're thinking, wait, you're getting more flight for less money. Yeah, it doesn't make sense, but don't write off the smaller regional airports. If you're on Google Flights and you're trying to book something, when you go into the map view, you can look at other airports in the region. So if you're trying to book a trip, be sure and do this. Just click on the different airports and put in your dates and see if anything will be cheaper than flying into the big hub, the major airport in that area. A couple words of caution about this. Some people use this and they say, okay, I'm going to fly into, in my case of my story, I'll fly into Frankfurt and then I'll just ditch. I'm just going to bail and I'm not going to fly the rest of the itinerary from Frankfurt to Basel. But the issue can be sometimes the airline will kill the rest of your reservation if you miss that flight. So say you ditch after that first leg, then your return trip will be canned. So maybe not the smartest idea in that sense. But if you are flying back home and say you don't need the rest of your itinerary, you're just missing one regional flight that you don't need, oh well, you could miss it in that regard. But also keep in mind, your checked bag is going to go all the way to your final destination. So I don't love to travel with a checked bag. I like to take it all with me. It's lighter, it's easier to get around. But if you do have a checked bag, your checked bag is going to follow your full itinerary. We're gonna jump into Google Flights, but if you haven't listened to anything else, listen to this. If you are on the fence about whether to book something internationally, do not wait. there's this really cool thing. It's protected by US federal law that you have 24 hours. If you're booking a flight from like the US, an international flight from the US, you have 24 hours to cancel it with no penalty and you get all your money back. I'm not talking about a voucher. I'm not talking about you get something back that you can then use to get another flight somewhere else. No. You can get all of your money back. There are no penalties if you cancel within 24 hours. So that is really convenient. If you're on the fence, if you see a price that you think you're not going to be able to beat, go ahead and book it. And then use the next day to do tons of research, and then you have 24 hours to make that final decision whether you want to keep it or you want to cancel it and get all your money back. A lot of people don't know that, but that is a really great way to kind of game the system. You can hold your reservation, you know the price isn't going to change, and then you still have time to make the final decision. Okay, there's my screen. So now I'm going to show you exactly what is my thought process, what am I doing when I'm looking at flights online. First off, the big thing I want you to notice is we are in incognito. These sites that you use to search for flights on, they use cookies and your cache to track what you are searching. So if you are looking at one itinerary over and over on multiple days, you will probably notice that it's going to go up in price because they see that you have this interest, and the system they have algorithms and things that are crazy genius that will do that. If you don't believe me, whatever, go look it up for yourself. I've experienced this multiple times when I'm just searching for flights. I'll look at one itinerary like day after day just to see if the price has changed or anything. And like there's been multiple times where on my third or fourth day looking at something, I noticed that the price is $100, $200 or more expensive than it was when I first started. So if we come in here to Google Flights, this is my preferred search engine. Some people recommend Skyscanner, Momondo. I've used those. They're okay. Personally, I love Google Flights. This is my favorite place. It aggregates all kinds of flight information that can be really helpful. So there's two ways that I go about this. First off, say you are super flexible. You say, I have X amount of money and I just want to travel, but I'm open to different dates, different locations. I just kind of want to explore. I'm curious, where even could I travel? Check this out. So if you scroll down on Google Flights, they have this cool like explore feature right here. Explore destinations. So if you just open this, you can even zoom in to different parts of the world. So right here, you'll see I have pulled up 1 week, like a 1 week trip in the next 6 months from Charlotte. That's my home airport. So if I can even go over here specifically, I clicked on Pittsburgh, but if I go out of that, I can go over here and zoom in and we can look at Europe. You can see multiple options that are a lot more affordable than a traditional ticket over there. So like Stockholm, you see we got $524, even Helsinki up there for $600, but I don't think many people want to be going that close to Russia at the current moment. Poland, got a couple good deals or 3 good deals in Poland. But you can just kind of look around here and see where are you wanting to go, and you could see some of these other airports in that region that might be cheaper than flying into the biggest airport. See, you have Paris right here, a massive airport for Europe, but I mean the cheapest flights they have on here, $740. Now this is just aggregating and picking random dates, but still it's just a good kind of tool to use to figure out a good place to start. So you see London, $760, Paris, Amsterdam, but this gives you a good idea of some of these other places to consider. So we're okay. Lisbon, pretty good. So if I were planning, I would highlight some of these. I would make note. Okay, let's check out Milan, Zurich, and Geneva. Also traditionally have pretty competitive prices. Eastern Europe over here. Let's keep in mind this. Let's go down, check out Romania, see if there's anything good. Yikes, Bucharest, pretty pricey. But, wow. So this is a good place to start. So if you know you want to get across the Atlantic, we could just look at a few of these options. So Milan, we're talking the last week of October, and a Delta flight with only 1 stop and 14 hours is going to have a short layover. So that's a pretty sweet setup. If we're wanting to go somewhere further north, we could look at the Stockholm option and just check this out. That's American and Finnair. I don't love Americans, so I would probably steer clear of that. But see, there's a Delta option here for $547. And if you click on this, it'll open the options and you can look at them. So say, okay, I like that Delta option. But then keep in mind, these return flights are not ideal. So we'll go back here and look at, like, let's say Zurich. So United, with one stop, that's a pretty good setup. But the issue here is with each of these options and locations that we're looking at different dates. So this is ideal if you just want the cheapest possible flight and you're very flexible. But a lot of people aren't that way. But don't close this tab yet, because I do come back to this and use this just as a kind of gauge on the cheaper options or, cities to look at if we're wanting to go to Europe. Okay, so let's open another tab in Google Flights. This is great if you know the dates you want to travel. So you want to go to Europe for Thanksgiving. Okay, so say you want to leave the day before Thanksgiving, and you'll come back the following Tuesday. Okay, so we're doing a Wednesday through a Tuesday. So I'll hit done right here. And I have Charlotte inputted as my departing airport. But then instead of putting a location in the where to part, I'm just going to hit search. And you can, here's that place where you would do one way, multi-city if you wanted to look at the itineraries that I was talking about earlier. But I'm just going to start with round trip. This is always where I begin. And here you can see for these particular dates how much it would cost to fly to different locations. So if you're looking at the US, you have that here. I'm going to scroll over to Europe. And here you go. Sometimes it'll take a minute for these to populate, but now you can really start to see the differences in price and things like, Paris for those dates, the cheapest option would be $740. Whereas if I'm open to flying into Milan and then taking another budget quick flight to Paris, I maybe could save $150. Warsaw, $506. So I would like to I'm just going to click on a couple of these and open up and see what we're looking at. So Lufthansa, great airline to fly with, $506 with only one stop. I would highly recommend that. You look over here at Athens, also Lufthansa. The one-stop option's a little more expensive, but for two stops, you can fly on Lufthansa and Swiss. Swiss Airlines is a fine airline, so that's a good one to consider. If you're looking, you want to come further west, really on the tip of Western Europe, Lufthansa, one stop for $606 for those dates. That's a pretty good deal. A lot of people ask, what's a good price if I'm flying to Europe? I think if you can get a flight for right around $500 round trip, book it. Because that's $500 round trip to Europe per person. That's a pretty great deal. I know I and other people, I'm sure, have paid a lot more than that at different times. So, for our example, you want to go to Paris, or you want to come to Paris on these dates. There's a couple things I'll do just from the outset. So, we see if we fly straight into Paris for these particular dates, we're talking right at $750 is the cheapest itinerary that Google Flights has found. So, there are a couple things. First off, I'm going to look at other airports in the region. So Luxembourg is nearby, so I'm curious what the price would be there. I'm curious what Brussels would be. And if you actually go out of this view, it'll populate just the price. So $605, $639 for Brussels. So cheaper, but still, I'm like, is it worth the extra hassle for only $150 like in Basel? Okay, so let's zoom out a little bit further. There's another thing I'm going to do. So let's put in Paris. And then I'm going to hit view flights right here. And I'm going to look at a couple things. So, we live in Charlotte, but I'd also be willing to fly out of Atlanta. I've done that before. So, I'm going to put that right here. I'm going to put Hartsfield-Jackson. I'm going to put Greenville. Greenville's just off I-85 between Charlotte and Atlanta. I'm going to put Asheville even. Asheville's another city in North Carolina. So I'm just going to put a few options of places I'd be willing to fly out of here. And then we'll see if anything's cheaper. So, okay, so we can see if we're willing to fly out of Asheville, we could save a little money. $693. That's nice. Let's even look at destinations. So I know that Brussels is close. I'd be willing to fly into Brussels. I know Luxembourg is right there. I talked about Basel earlier, city in Switzerland's not too far. So I'll put in a few destinations also. So now, and sometimes this stresses Google Flights out because it's trying to populate all this information, but now it's looking at potential departures and potential arrivals all in that area. So this is helpful. So the cheapest we're seeing here is from Charlotte to Basel. So Charlotte, that's perfect because that's where we're at. To Basel for $606, which we saw that earlier, and there's a layover in Munich. So honestly, this is a really great price, and it's hard to beat. But we're going to be flying into Basel. To get from Basel to Paris, it's going to cost me in the ballpark between like $20 and $40, and it's going to take about 3 hours by train. There are other options that are buses, but that takes about a little bit longer, around 5 hours, so I'd prefer the train. I like trains in Europe. You can get to see the landscape. It's really neat. So then we have to decide. I could book this and pay $630, and I'll fly into Basel, get there soon after lunch, and then I'll go from Basel to Paris. And so I wouldn't be getting into Paris until later in the afternoon or really the evening. So let's go back here. So I'm just going to go back and look at the best departing flights. Let me make sure. Basel, Lux, Brussels. Honestly, you can even put London in here. There's even a high-speed train from... Okay, so here's what I'm talking about. Too many. So let me take out Luxembourg. Let's see if it'll take it. No. Take out Brussels. See if it'll take it. Nope. Let me take out Basel. See if it'll take it. Okay. Another option is London. London is just one train ride under the English Channel away from Paris. So that's another thing you could keep in mind. So based on what we just saw, we know we could probably get it for like $640. We could fly into Basel, take a train to Paris. That's an option. Or we could just book this from Asheville and get there for $693. That's another option. This is really basic, entry level, but this is what you want to be thinking about. Say you know you really want to go to Europe and you're flexible. Okay, let's look at Greece. Greece is really popular now. Everybody and their mother wants to go to Santorini. So let's look at Santorini, and I'm going to view flights. Now, these are just the dates, the generic dates that Google populated based on price. But if I just click on the dates and you give it a minute, it will actually load. You can see on the date view, on the calendar, the estimated prices for specific dates. So this is a great place to come. And you can see where, the closer we get to where we're currently at, the more expensive it's going to be. But if we go further out here, like I'm even seeing, okay, there's something in August. Looks like if we fly out on the 9th, we could save a little money, or even the 10th is a little bit cheaper. So let's see, if we returned, okay, so that's, 8 days? Wow. Oh, 2 stops. So that's Delta, and Air France. So a decent itinerary. I don't love that there's 2 stops, but then you can look at return options. Nope, that's other departing options. So then I'm going to select this flight for my departure and then look at return options. Oof. Now this is where, okay, overnight layer, 11 hours in Paris, 9 p.m. to 8 a.m. If it was 8 a.m. to 9 p.m., I would like it a little more because you could go out into the city and at least do something. But in this case, I don't love this. So I'm going to go back and go back to my date and look at the other options. So let's go a little further out. Let's look at September, October. So you can see the cheapest prices. I mean, this is an illustration of what we were talking about earlier. During the week is usually a little cheaper. You can see these in here. Of course, it's not a foolproof thing. It's not a foolproof strategy, but you can see these tend to be cheaper than the ones on the outside. So I'm going to go in September. Let's look at the 12th through the 20th. 546. Let's see what we can get here. So this first trip, 33 hours, burnt. We're not doing that. 17 hours with 2 stops. That's not too bad. Right here, you see you change airports. It's an inconvenience. I'd probably avoid that. But Google will even give you an estimate like, oh, this is low for your typical search. So you can see where we're at 2 months ago, a month ago, and more recently. So that's just good to let kind of know, okay, is this a fair price? But again, if you're talking $500-600 to get to Europe round trip, that's a pretty good price. So let's click on that. Now we're looking at returns. Okay, there's nothing really available for returns. So let's go back to our departure again, and let's tweak our dates a little bit. So, let's just, nope. Let's do that. Okay, let's just see what's available here. 2 stops, 16 hours. Pretty good. American and British Airways. Again, I don't love American, but just for the sake of this, we'll look at it. And here's a return that's only 21 hours. I still don't love how long that is. You see you have a 5-hour layover in Madrid, which really isn't enough time to get out and see any of the city. You could go out and take a train in but then probably have to come right back out soon. But this is just gives you a good idea. So this is a pretty good itinerary. It's not, I wouldn't book it right now, but here's an option. You could say, okay, September 19th to the 27th, we're talking $550. But if I were you, I would continue. Come back out here and look in this date view and put in tons of different options. And this is where you can really game the system. Come in here, add other options. Let's look at Atlanta. Let's look at Greenville. Let's look at Asheville. And wherever you live, think about all the airports in that region. And then if you want to fly to Greece, let's look at Athens. Let's look at Thessalonica, whatever, I can never say that. Let's look there. And you can come in here and you can say, oh, this, 518, that looks pretty good. Lufthansa flight. That's going from Charlotte to Athens. And then returning flight here with only 1 stop, 5 hours in Munich. This right here is an excellent itinerary. I would book this before I would book the last one. So then you could look at options of getting from Athens to Santorini if you want to go to Santorini. Or maybe you could go back here to the main view. You could go into multi-city and you could say, okay, I want to go in to Athens. We're going to see Athens for 3-4 days. Then we're going to fly to Santorini, see Santorini, and then fly back. I would continue to come in here, play around with it. Right now, I think the best we've seen is that round trip to Athens, 518. You're not going to beat that at all. So then you could look at ways to get from Athens to Santorini. Is that something you want to consider doing? Or would you rather just spend a couple $100 more and fly directly into Santorini? It's a smaller area. It's the transportation options aren't going to be as big as if you're trying to get to Paris or, London, a bigger city in Europe. But this is basic. I could go on for hours. This is just one example. I'm just trying to give you an overview of things to think about. Come in here, look at locations, look at the date map. And if I were you, start by just looking at the area that you want to go. So if you're flexible on dates, you come here. That's a great place to start. But if you aren't flexible on dates, I did not mean to click on Russia there. If you aren't flexible on dates, you can go to flights and you can put in your specific dates. So we want to travel this through this in November, the week of Thanksgiving, and then you can search and you can look at how much it would cost to go to different places in the world. So if you're debating where to go, you can say, oh, we could go to Alaska for $500 a person, or we could go to Seoul for $919, or come back over to Europe and you see your options here. But please, whatever you do, don't just go online, put in your dates, and book the first flight you see. There are so many ways that you can kind of game this to get around it. A pro tip, it doesn't exactly apply to Europe, but if you're flying in the US, Southwest is not included in Google Flights. So if you're flying Southwest, come right here and go to their website and look at their flights. Pro tip for those who really want to travel, really want to get out, and you're just kind of adventurous and open to anything, I would encourage you, check out Scott's Cheap Flights and Airfarewatchdog. Scott's Cheap Flights, they have a premium service, which is incredible. I've used it on a trial basis, but even with their free version, they have this thing where you click on I'm feeling adventurous and it populates different places you could go. But with their services, you can put in airports you would consider leaving from and areas that you want to go, and you like prioritize them. And then they'll send you different options. Like, hey, we found this option in May for $400 or $300 or however much the cost is. But what they're really looking for is mistake fares. There are still mistakes that happen. And sometimes you can find these, one-off chances where, hey, here's this one flight that's ridiculously priced. And so they'll send you emails with updates on those. The only thing about Scott's Cheap Flights is if you get one of those emails, it will, and you click on the itinerary, it will open in Google Flights. And I would encourage you, book it as soon as possible. Because if it's a mistake, the airline doesn't want you to see that. And so I have a feeling they're going to try to fix it ASAP. So just remember that. If you see one of those, like if you see a crazy good price, book it. And then remember, you have 24 hours to go back and cancel it. But don't wait. I've spent time before like waiting around like, I don't know. Let me talk to Alexa. And then the option was gone and I lost my opportunities. I've been talking a lot. I promise this is it. Number 3, numero tres, is adjusting. So say you have your trip booked and then something changes. Okay, well, we all know COVID, it's kind of changed a lot when it comes to travel, but it's not all bad. So, check this out. Say you book a flight and you book a round trip ticket from somewhere in the US to Europe. But in a couple weeks, you get one of these emails. I hate them. I've seen them, tons of them. And it'll say, flight change, flight itinerary change. You'll get an email. They'll say, we're not running this, or we rebooked you from this to this other flight. And you can accept it, or there's another option. Do not accept it. Never hit accept. Okay, even if you do, you're probably fine. But the cool thing is, by US law, you are protected that if the airline changes your itinerary from what you originally booked, you are entitled to a full cash refund. Sorry, not sure why I'm clapping. But you book a flight, you book an itinerary, they change it. You are entitled to get all of your money back. So, if your plans change and you think you booked a flight 6 months in advance that you know you're not going to be able to take, unless you're still within that 24-hour window, I would encourage you to hold it. I know that feels weird. You're like, I know I can't go on the trip. Don't cancel it yet. Okay? Now, I have heard of so many stories of people even having flights canceled with like a day or two out from the flight. Or maybe even the flight wasn't canceled, but they were just modified. They were put on a different itinerary, a different route. So keep that in mind, because if they change anything, you are entitled to get your money back. So that's a good thing to remember. But I don't love the idea of just getting my money back, because the other cool piece of this is if the airline changes anything, you have a lot of leverage. You now have the upper hand. Okay, so we've had this happen a few times, and I like to use the airline's changes to my advantage to get a better timed flight, a better location, fewer layovers. I mean, you really got to think. You can maximize their issues to your advantage. If I were you, I would come back into Google Flights and look at other options. Okay, so I'll give you an example. We just recently returned from Venice. So let's just put in random dates here. It doesn't really matter. I just want to show you a little bit. So we're just going to look from Charlotte to Venice. We had an itinerary with United, but United changed our flights. So we were leaving directly out of Charlotte and flying from Charlotte to Munich and then from Munich to Venice, but they canceled the leg from Charlotte to Munich. So they said, okay, you're going to fly from Charlotte to Chicago, then Chicago to Venice or somewhere in Europe. So we use that as leverage. So I came in here and I'm going to look at airlines. And so if I know that I'm working with United, they are the Star Alliance. You could look that up online. But I'm going to click off here. So there's, United, Lufthansa, other airlines that are part of this alliance. But here you can put in your travel dates and you can look at options that are only offered from this particular alliance. So if I know I want to go on these dates and they change something about my itinerary and I don't love it, I'm going to look at other options. And I'm not going to have to pay for it. So you have to keep that in mind too. So I'm more likely to look at these more expensive options because it's on their dime. So I'm going to put nonstop. There's no nonstop staying. That's a bummer. So I'm not actually booking this. This is just giving me an idea of what else is out there from the Star Alliance. So then I'm going to reach out to United. I'm going to say, hey, you changed my itinerary and it doesn't work. What? You can just say that? Yeah, you can say that. You're the customer. You don't have to give them a reason. You don't have to write them a letter. You can just say, you changed it. It doesn't work. I would like to change it. And if you're on with a chat agent, you can tell them what else you have found. So here's where I would say, I see there's a flight from Charlotte to Munich, and then another flight from Munich to Venice. Can we look at getting on that instead? Send them the flight information. Sometimes they'll be difficult with you. I've only had like one tell me no, and I've done this like 7 times, but I've only had one tell me no, and I just got off with them and then got on with another person, and the other person helped me. So also, pro tip, if you fly with United or Delta and you have an iPhone, they have actual iMessage like interfaces where you can chat in iMessage with your agent. It's basically like a text message. So that makes it just a little bit easier because you're not having to keep some tab open on your computer, or you're not having to call them and sit on hold for 2.5 years, which honestly, especially recently, those wait times are horrendous. So please try to chat with them. Look at other options before you call, because I've heard a lot of horror stories with calling. But just remember, come back into Google Flights, look at options, and also ask them. They will tell you what other options they see, but sometimes there might be an option that you see that they're not seeing, or they don't think is a possibility. And if you poke and prod a little bit and say, hey, are you sure? Or can you ask someone else on your team? Usually, well, again, I've done this like 7 times and I have had success every single time, except for one, and then I just got another person and then had success. So this is a great way to game the system. A couple quick practical examples of this. For our honeymoon, Alexa and I were going to go to Cancun, and we booked it before COVID. We paid a good bit. I can't remember the exact number, but it was a good bit. And so then COVID happened and prices went way down, and they changed our itinerary. So we then canceled the flights, got our full money back, and then went and booked cheaper flights and saved our money. So that's one instance where it's really helped us out. Another instance is most recently on our recent Europe trip. We had the itinerary changed. We were flying into Venice, but then because of some of my work, we looked like we were going to go to Russia. Yikes. Didn't work out, but this was pre-craziness and war. But we were going to go to Russia, and so I talked with the United people. I was like, hey, you changed our flights. Can we just drop the leg to Venice, and we just want to fly into Munich so then we can get to Russia easily? And they worked with us. And then later, I went back and added the leg to get to Paris. My brain's all over the place. To get from Munich to Venice, and they added it right back, a different flight. And again, didn't have to pay $1 for any of the changes because they are the ones that changed the itinerary first. Please keep that in mind. This can be a game changer. We use these principles over and over and over to get better flights, to find cheaper flights, and to travel more. Now, I know you might like flying first class and you might be able to do that, but I have a feeling if you're watching this video, it's probably because you want to travel more on a budget, and I think these tips will help you do just that. Okay, now the question I know you're wondering, how do we go to Europe for free? Okay, remember how I talked about that 24-hour rule where if you buy a flight that's an international flight, you have 24 hours to cancel it and get your money back? When I booked our most recent trip to Europe, I had us leaving on a Thursday. But then I was doing more research after I booked the tickets, and I realized that we could leave on a Wednesday and the flight would cost exactly the same, and they were running like the same route on the Wednesday, and so we'd have an extra day over there. So I was like, oh, I want to do that. But it was within the 24 hours, so I canceled everything on United's website and got the confirmation that everything was canceled, and then I turned around and booked the same ticket for the extra day. Everything cost the same. Booked it. So I had 2 charges on my credit card for this. Okay, well, a couple weeks pass. There's still no refund. A few weeks pass. There's still no refund. So finally, I reach out and I'm like, hey, where's my money? And we get refunded twice. But the tickets were still there. I checked online 100 times. I legitimately 100 times. Nothing happened to our itinerary. So United just refunded us twice. I don't know if it was some issue with their system or what, but we got refunded twice. Our itinerary, our confirmation, everything was still there. It was still active online. So yeah, we just used the 24-hour thing and it kind of worked out. But I'm not saying you'll have the same experience. Our next trip we're planning solely based on credit card points. So our next trip we're gonna go for free based on credit card rewards and using these tips to find cheaper flights. Follow these. Spend some time on Google Flights, do the digging, take the time to do the research, because in the end you can save hundreds and hundreds of dollars. If you have any questions, let us know in the comments. I know this video isn't perfect, but if there's anything you think of that like, oh, I didn't fully understand that, or I want you to go into more detail, let us know. And please hit subscribe. We have so much more coming. A lot of fun travel things. We're talking with a lot of cool people and exploring some neat places. So I hope you'll follow along and I hope you enjoyed this. From us to you, go travel. I have like 30 seconds left on this recording. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe. Let us know in the comments, what do you think? Use these principles and go travel the world. Meet new people, eat new foods, do crazy things, live your best life. Ciao. Book that next trip. Do it. Wait, let's do a thumbnail real quick. Hold on. No, it has to be shocked.